What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to Clutch Talk today. Episode 12 today. Again, continuing our season previews of as many college football teams as we can get through. And today, it'll be LSU and Kansas State today. Two teams with high expectations expected to be at the top of the conference. LSU, this is kind of like the make or break year of the Brian Kelly era. And then Kansas State, one of the most consistent programs in college football, continuing at it. They've won 9+ games since Chris Kleiman has got there. So high expectations for them, high expectations for both programs, and we're going to get into them today. If you're new to the channel and like the content, please subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot. 90% of my viewers are not subscribed, so let's get that fixed. Continuing to grow, again, on the road to 100 subscribers as fast as possible. And again, go follow the Instagram at Clutch Talk as well. And we're going to continue to roll things in. Going to start again transitioning into position groups, grading those as well. Offensive line will be the first video that should come out very soon as well. And we're going to get into that. But first, we'll get into LSU and Kansas State today. Let's get started. I want to start with LSU today. LSU, 9-4 last year, had 3 straight losses in October and November that really kind of killed the season. They lose at A&M. In a game they probably shouldn't have lost. Marcel Reed comes in that second half and takes over that game. You have the Alabama game where they got embarrassed at home. At Death Valley at night, Alabama manhandled LSU, and then they lose to Florida at the Swamp in November as well before beating Vanderbilt and Oklahoma and Baylor to go 9-4. Not the season LSU fans are looking for, and it's kind of been the theme of this Brian Kelly era. You know, you make the SEC championship game, you know, your first year, still go about 10-3. Then you have the Heisman Trophy winner, but a god-awful defense, so you go 10-3 that year as well. And then last year, the defense did improve, still not to the level you want it to be, and they could not run the football. And therefore, 9-4 is record this year. And this is kind of the year where they're expecting a lot of LSU football this year. If we look at the key returners offensively, quarterback Garrett Nussmeier is obviously the storyline for this. 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions last year. He's got to cut down the turnovers a little bit, but extremely big arm. He's been around. He's waited his turn at LSU. He's got his chance now at quarterback to lead them to a national championship. Running back Caden Durham as a freshman last year at 754 yards. Going to be the lead back, and they're expecting more out of him this year. Expecting more of that run game overall last year. They were really bad running the football last year. And then wide receiver Aaron Anderson at 875 yards last year. He was the leading receiver on that team. Extremely dynamic in the open field. Good on the deep ball. He's only 5'8", but he can fly down a football field. And then some of the transfers they brought in, they really bolster this pass catching room. Headlined by Nick Anderson, transfer from Oklahoma. Now, 700 yards and 10 touchdowns, so it's listed, but that was the year before. So last year, he missed most of the season with an injury. He's coming back from that. But, man, when Nick Anderson's healthy, there's not many better receivers in college football, in my opinion. Really good in the red zone area, good red zone target. And then they get Barron Brown out of Kentucky, who had 360 yards last year. Kind of underused at Kentucky, a really good speedy receiver that they're going to put in the slot, I would assume. And he's expected to have a big year. And then they get Bauer Sharp at Oklahoma, one of the better pass-catching tight ends in the SEC last year, 324 yards there. But LSU's offense last year was very pass-heavy. There was 61% pass rate compared to only 39% on the ground. That's got to get better. If you look at even like 2019 LSU team, you know, LSU teams that have won in the past, they've ran the football, or even national championship teams. Like Ohio State was a pass more team last year, but they also had a little bit of physicality around the football. You got to be able to be a little bit more balanced than LSU was last year. They threw it 533 times and only ran it 374. I think it's got to get to more 450, 450, or at least 500, 375. You got to be able to run the football more this year, in my opinion. And the offensive line was just average last year. Like, they didn't choose to run the ball a lot, but even when they did, they were only getting 4.1 yards a carry. They weren't super dynamic in the run game. And that's still also a question because now you lose both of the starting tackles, Will Campbell, who was a top 5 draft pick, and then Emory Jones, who was an all-SEC tackle as well last year. You lose him. But the turnovers-wise, I think interceptions will drop for Nussmeier this year. I think he's going to do a better job of taking care of the football with, again, 1 year more in the system, more experience. He's also a Heisman favorite. He's projected to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, but he's also top 3, top 5 on Heisman boards as well. He's up there with the K. Klubniks, and he's up there with the Arch Mannings and all that, Jeremiah Smiths of the world as the Heisman board. But again, the offensive line being rebuilding is a little bit of concern. One, not just for the run game, but also for Nussmeier's protection. But their wide receiver room is the unit that's going to get them a lot of points and a lot of wins potentially. I mean, you have three receivers who Barron Brown was a wide receiver one last year. I mean, Dan Key, they say with some, but I think Barron Brown was wide receiver one on that team last year at Kentucky. Nick Anderson, when he was healthy, was wide receiver one at Oklahoma. And then Aaron Anderson was wide receiver one last year. So, and Bauer Sharp, tight end one, and he would be tight end one on almost any team in the SEC. So, very, very good pass catching room. Overall, the offensive line's a question. And we'll get in the numbers on them later. If we want to transition to the defense, key returners, linebacker Whit Weeks, a unit, and he's the leader of that defense. 8 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 4 pass deflections. He is the very definition of LSU football and what you want out of an LSU defender and linebacker. He eats, sleeps, and breathes LSU football. And then they get linebacker Harold Perkins back. He had 5.5 sacks the year before last, because last year, for those who don't remember, he got hurt. I think it was the second or third game of the season with an ACL tear. So he's coming back from injury just to bolster that linebacker room to be one of the best linebacker rooms in the country. And then cornerback Ashton Stamps had 11 pass deflections last year. He was really, really good last year. And then they get in the transfer portal, they really bolstered this defensive front, particularly defensive line, defensive end. Patrick Payton out of Florida State comes in 10 tackles for loss and 4 sacks last year. And then Bernard Gooden, 10 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. He's from University of South Florida. And then they also had another piece of secondary, Mansur Delane, who had 7 pass deflections, 4 interceptions last year from Virginia Tech. The defense struggled to force turnovers, but they improved a lot from the Jane Daniels year. I mean, last year was a massive improvement from where they were to where they got under Blake Baker, who's going to be the year 2 of his defense. It was an improved run defense, which is kind of the thing. They got gashed on the ground last year. They dropped it to 140 yards allowed per game on the ground. I would like that to go up, and I also like to see the interceptions go. They only got 6 picks last year. I would expect that to go up. But that linebacker room is very elite. I think that's what's going to help this run game. Getting Harold Perkins back is going to help this run defense tremendously. And then getting guys like Patrick Payton and Bernard Gooden, I think is going to help this defensive front a ton. I really like this the front 7 this year for LSU, particularly who they got out of the portal. And A.J. Hawley, I didn't mention him. He's an elite safety, one of the better safeties in college football. He was rated, I think PFF had him top 15 safety in the country. So really good safety up front. And overall, a solid defensive group it looks like could be for LSU. Another year where they expect to jump defensively. Looking at the numbers from last year, they were 7th in passing, 107th in rushing. Like I said, that has to go up. 25th total, 47th scoring, 17 sacks allowed. Really good on third down, 6th in third down, 73rd in the red zone. And defensively, 76th in passing, 51st in rushing, 61st total defense, 59th scoring defense. 30th in sacks, 84th on third down, 19th in the red zone. I think all those numbers from defensively are going to go up. I think this defense can be much improved. I can see them going from 24 points per game allowed to 20 to 18, 19, like 18 to 20 range. I think this defense can be much, much improved from last year, and I think you'll see it early on. But again, this is the make or break year for LSU football. They've said that they wanted to run the football. They said they wanted to be physical in the line of scrimmage. They said they wanted to play tough, hard-nosed physical defense. You got to put it on the table now, because if you don't, you're going to have another disappointing 9-3, 9-4, 8-4 season. And then that's when the hot seat gets a little bit warm from Brian Kelly, and this program could be trending in the wrong direction, and things could get south very quickly. You gotta perform this year, and I think you have to make the playoff if you're LSU. With that being said, the worst they can do is 7-5, and that would be disaster. I think that'd be lose to Clemson, lose to Florida, lose to A&M, lose to Alabama, lose to Oklahoma. I think they would split potentially A&M and Ole Miss. But 7-5 is the worst. And Brian Kelly, I think, would be fired after that season. I really believe that. I think LSU fans would revolt, and he would be fired, unfortunately. The best is undefeated. Their schedule's difficult. I understand that. But at the same time, this LSU team is talented enough to go undefeated. There are very few teams that are talented enough where the best they can do is undefeated. And I think LSU is one of those teams where they have the talent level to do so. Because I don't think there's that much of a difference talent gap between Alabama and LSU. I actually think LSU is more talented than Clemson. I think they're more talented than Florida, A&M, so forth. So I think 12-0 would be the best case scenario, and that would be a 2019 kind of season. Most likely, I'm going to say 10-2. I think they will be in the playoff this year. I'll say that right now. I think they will be in the college football playoff this year. I don't think they're going to be Clemson week 1, though. And that's when people are going to overreact. Like, oh, my God, Brian Kelly still can't win a week 1 game. He had won a week 1 game since he got here. That's where people need to calm down. They played some tough week 1 games. That Florida State game where they got blown out, that's a good Florida State team that almost made the playoff. Clemson this year is going to be a really good football team. There's no need to overreact to that. USC, I kind of understand, but USC was in a lot of close games last year and just happened to be on the right side of that one. And so I look at him like, yeah, he's lost every first game, and I think he will lose to Clemson. But he's played some tough first games, and you're going to Death Valley at night, like Clemson Death Valley at night. So I don't think people need to overreact if he does lose that game, and I think he will lose at Alabama. But aside from that, I think they will go 10-2. I think this is set up to be a really good year for LSU. Defensive numbers are going to improve, and I expect big things at LSU this season. Moving on, we'll go to Kansas State. We're at the half point way of the video. If you like the video, again, subscribe and like the video for the channel. And we're going to transition to Kansas State, one of the most consistent football programs in the country. They win a lot of games consistently each and every year, and they've got a returning experience this year, and we're going to get into that. This is kind of another big year, potentially, for Kansas State. They kind of need to win a lot this year, and we'll get into that. If we look at the numbers from last year, let's go ahead and dive into these numbers from last year. Or not numbers. Let's go ahead and dive into key returners. We'll get into numbers later. Let's dive into key returners from last year. Cornerback Avery Johnson's back at quarterback, 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He's also a dual threat guy, 600 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns last year. He's got to be more consistent in the pass game, only completed about 58% of his passes. But he is dynamic on the ground when he uses his legs. Things can go for 6 every time he touches it. They're in a wide receiver 1 back as well in Jace Brown. 823 yards, 5 touchdowns last year, and then they get their center back, Sam Hecht, 97% of the snaps last year in a B-plus grade. Really good up front. And then transfers, they bolster this receiver room, getting Jerron Tibbs out of Purdue, 305 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Caleb Medford out of New Mexico at 336 yards last year. And they also added this offensive tackle from Ohio State, George Fitzpatrick. He only played 6.6% of the snaps, but at A- grade. He's projected to start there, and he was highly recruited out of high school. So they're expected him to start at tackle immediately. Last year, offensively, they were very balanced, very, very balanced. And I think expect that to be the same. Again, no matter what the offensive line looks like, who the quarterback is, Chris Kleiman wants to be physical and run the football and set it for play action. They were very explosive. I expect it to be the same. Avery Johnson's extremely explosive when he gets the ball in his hands. But they did struggle with passing consistency. That's what I said earlier. He's got to be a little bit more consistent because there were games where defenders didn't necessarily even respect his arm. I think Arizona State did a very good job exploiting that, and as well as Iowa State, one of the better defenses. So I think we got to see more consistency in the pass game. But Dylan Edwards, it's his turn now as a starter. Dylan Edwards, if y'all don't remember, was a 5-star that went to Colorado, transferred to Kansas State after 1 year. Last year, he averaged 7 yards a carry. Again, he was behind DJ Giddens, who had 1,300 yards last year, and all that. But 7.4 yards a carry for Dylan Edwards last year. It's now his turn to be the lead back, and he could have a monster year. The offensive line's a little bit of rebuild, only 1 starter returning in Sam Hecht, but they brought in a lot of transfers that had high grades. And again, I think no matter who the offensive line pieces are, I think Chris Kleiman's going to have a solid offensive line. But now it's Matt Wells, who's the offensive coordinator. He was the co-offensive coordinator last year, now just the offensive coordinator by himself. If y'all don't remember Matt Wells, he was the Texas Tech coach before joining McGuire. So he's now calling plays by himself, so that will also be a little interesting to see how Avery Johnson goes with that, even though he kind of was the play caller last year but wasn't fully the play caller. We'll get in the numbers on them later. Looking at the defense, though, some big returners. That linebacker room is going to be good. Austin Romaine returns 8 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 pass deflections. Then Desmond Purnell, 10 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. And they get safety BJ Payne, who had 4 tackles for loss, 3 pass deflections, and 2 interceptions. Really, really good returners, particularly in that linebacker room. Some transfers, they brought in a Marion Fortenberry from South Alabama at corner, 6 pass deflections, 2 interceptions. And then Gunnar Maldonado from Arizona, 1 tackle for loss and interception. He played safety. That defensive line was really, really good last year, and they're returning a good amount of production from that defensive line. I think they could still be really good there next year or this year. 61% first and second down success. That's one of the best ones in the country. They were really good on first, second down. They get you behind the line of scrimmage early, force you into long third downs. Then they were really good against the run. And again, this Chris Kleiman has a lot of similar, just familiar traits with his teams each year. Another one is they're going to be good against the run no matter who's there. And they're returning a lot there, so they could be really good against the run this year. Because that linebacker unit, to me, is top 10 in college football. I think that linebacker group is going to be one of the top 10 in college football. The defensive front's really deep. They can play 9 guys, I think, on that defensive front. They can rotate 4 in, 4 out continuously on drives, and they'll wear teams down with their depth. And Austin Romaine, like I mentioned, I think he's a top 10 linebacker in college football. Really good of reading the run. Again, he's going to be him and Desmond Purnell against that run defense could be really good. For those who don't remember, they only gave up 3.6 yards a rush last year, so really good there. Because we look at the numbers from last year, 85th passing, I think that has to go up with Avery Johnson returning. 11th rushing offense, really good. 31st total, 46 scoring. 10th in sacks allowed. 62nd on third down, 39th in the red zone. Very interested to see how that sacks number looks with the new offensive line early on, because they play Iowa State week 0 in Ireland. So I'm interested to see how that looks, considering Iowa State's defense, one of the best in college football consistently. Defensively, though, 77th in passing, 28th rushing, 43rd total, 50th scoring, 25th sacks, 56 on third down, 72nd in the red zone. I think they could be improved in the passing. Really good rushing defense, I think, will be the same this year. I think this team overall defensively is going to be really good this year. Offensively, they're going to have to figure out how to be consistent in the run game early on, just until that offensive line gels. And I think it's going to have to be Avery Johnson stepping up this year. I think his completion percentage has to go from 58 to 63. I think he has to have that much of an improvement. You can't go 15 for 30 against Rutgers or 12 for 28 against Iowa State. You can't go 24 for 40 in a game. You can't go 14 for 23 anymore. You got to be more consistent passing the ball, particularly in your intermediate throws. He has a pretty good deep ball, but you got to be more consistent in the intermediate game in order to win and get to where Kansas State, to get over that hump for Kansas State. So for my records, worst, best, and most likely, I'm going to say the worst is 6-6, because the Big 12 is just kind of this mob pit of teams just fighting for the spot, like kind of the top 6-7 teams just fighting for the spot. And I think that'd be like you lose to Iowa State. They could lose at Baylor. TCU they could lose to. They could lose to Texas Tech. They could lose at Utah. They could lose to Colorado. And they could lose at Kansas. And that would be Avery Johnson takes a step back. Let's say he gets hurt, or the interception numbers don't even go up. Let's say the offensive line really isn't that good, and so they can't run the ball, relying on Avery Johnson to make throws. And let's say the defense takes a step back maybe, or the secondary does not improve like we think it can. The best, though, is 11-1. I think it's to lose at Utah, but I think if Avery Johnson takes a big step, the run game's the same, secondary takes a step. I think, let's say, a Marion Fortenberry is just that much of an improvement at corner. I think 11-1's the best case scenario for that football team this year. The most likely, though, I'm going to say 10-2. Another 10-2 for this football team. I think it'd be like you lose to Iowa State, and then you lose to Utah, or you lose at Baylor and at Utah, 10-2. I could see this Kansas State team being in the Big 12 championship game come into season. I really could. If Avery Johnson takes a step, he's been getting better each year. I'll say that about Avery Johnson. I feel like I've just talked crap about him this whole time. He did get better from year one as a first-year starter. He was a first-year starter last year because the year before he started, he only completed 56% of his passes, 479 yards, 5 touchdowns. Year one as a starter, 58% completion percentage, 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. And again, he's always going to be such a thrower with his legs, where even if he's not throwing the ball amazing at that certain moment, he's going to keep you in the game because of his legs, and he's dynamic just until that run game or the pass game gets going. So I think Tennessee is the most likely. I'm very high on this Kansas State team. I think they're going to get over a little bit of hump, maybe get to the Big 12 championship game, and that'd be a good year for Kansas State. But with that being said, that'll also wrap up the end of our video. Again, I'm going to do offensive lines, ranking the top 10 offensive lines I think in college football this year. And then for team predictions, I think the next teams I'm going to do is Florida and Louisville. Florida has DJ Lagway. Biggest expectations are expected to have a really good offensive line, good run game. And then Louisville, I think, is going to be third in the ACC this year. They're going to be up there with the Miami and Clemson this year. Really workable schedule. Miller Moss is the quarterback there, transferred from USC, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that'll wrap up our video. Thank y'all for watching. See y'all.